Like, I never realized how many trees. There are trees. There are trees in New York. And so it really is great. The fall leaves are beautiful. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Dylan Callier. I'm a physical therapist, and welcome to the New Medical Nomads podcast, where I get to document my journey as a medical traveler, as well as interview other experts within the traveling field. Now, the rules for the traveling game are constantly changing, so anything you hear on this show should be for entertainment purposes only. This is not legal, financial, or medical advice. Enjoy the show and safe travels.
Welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. Today I am with Emma Shapiro, who is working on some books and some great information out there for traveling physical therapists. But Emma, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at in the world right now, and where you see yourself heading?
I am a physical therapist. I've been a PT for about 4 years. I did traveling for a couple years and sort of been all over the place. I was in California for a bit. Then now I'm in New Jersey, but I worked in New York. So I'm just sort of becoming more national, I guess, all over the place. And where I see myself in a couple years is, hopefully settling down. Traveling's great, but I want to start settling down a little bit more.
Got it. So you've been sticking out on the East Coast then?
Yes. Actually, I don't know if you want to get into the questions already, but I have the craziest story of actually how I got to the East Coast.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So I was a new grad and I found a great job my first year and I loved it and we're all settled. And then my boyfriend graduated. And so he's looking for jobs and he finds a job and he thinks it's in California. We were in California at the time. And it turns out it was in New Jersey. Wow. And so I was like, I don't even know anything about New Jersey. I'm sorry, New Jerseyans, but I had no idea anything of the East Coast, really. Very sheltered. And so he interviewed, he liked it, and he took it. And so I decided to go with him. And so we came here to New Jersey, but I really wasn't able to find a job. For months and months and months. I was searching, I was calling all sorts of companies. I had interviews with hospitals and things like that, but it was so hard with the California time zone and the East Coast time zone to communicate with everyone. And then they wanted me to come out in person to interview. And I was like, oh man, that's like expensive. I'm a new grad. I have all this debt. How am I going to do this? And then it's like super competitive. New York, New Jersey, East Coast is very competitive. And so we took a risk and I worked all the way up until about the second day. And we had packed everything, we'd shipped everything. So we're living in like a mattress with like one little bowl to cook out of and like one plate. And so we flew over to the East Coast and I still didn't have a job. And so here I am freaking out, new grad, all this debt, didn't have a job, no idea, like Jersey, what, nothing. And I was so freaking out. And I am in the hotel still trying to make calls for jobs. And I am interviewing while we're also looking for apartments. Because in the meantime, I know this story is a little crazy for people, but our stuff, we have a very short timeline. Our stuff is in the midst of being shipped and we have like 3 days to find an apartment. Otherwise our stuff is going to be in no man's land. And so I am job hunting and interviewing, meanwhile trying to figure out what is Jersey, what is New York, and trying to get our stuff over here. And I interviewed for a couple places, but traveling was just the best opportunity. And I remember being on my bed and that's where I had the interview call with the manager in New York. And I'm like, and it went really, really well. And I ended up accepting the job and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to work in New York City. And it just took off after that. But it was such a stressful time for me.
Very cool.
I had like IBS and everything, TMI, but it was great. So that's the crazy short version of how I got to the East Coast.
How was working in New York City? That's definitely a place on my list. maybe not somewhere I would want to live, but somewhere I definitely want to check out for maybe like 3 months. Can you talk about that?
I I liked it. You know, I think New York gets a bad rap and Jersey too gets a bad rap. You know, but I have to say I was so incredibly fortunate to be at a great facility for my first traveling job. My coworkers were very feisty. That's New York for you, but they were just so nice. You know, there's an honesty about New Yorkers and people on the East Coast that's actually sort of refreshing because you don't, you know, they're going to tell it how it is, which can be good and bad. But I really liked it. It's fast paced, though. It's very competitive. But it was great. I worked in sort of upstate New York at an acute care hospital for 2 years, actually. I was a traveler at the same facility, basically, you know, off and on in between the regulations for about 2 years.
Got it. Got it. Very cool.
I would recommend it. I would recommend taking a trip to the East Coast. You can see the, you know, downtown, you know, Times Square. But the tourist stuff is okay. What you really have to do for anyone who's new to the East Coast or wanting to come to the East Coast, the city is great, but you actually have to go outside the city, and then it's beautiful. Like, I never realized how many trees. There are trees. There are trees in New York. And so it really is great. The fall leaves are beautiful. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. I was talking a while back with somebody I bumped into who's from New Jersey, very close to New York City itself. And she was talking about her childhood, and I was talking about my childhood, and going between the culture differences, even here inside the United States. And so where I grew up, it was very predominantly white. We were a very small rural town off the river, blue collar. Once Toyota, there was a factory that moved in, a car factory. Then we started getting some Japanese into our town and stuff like that. And so that was really the first time we started having a cultural mix. But when I was talking with her, it was like, that was so out of the ordinary and off the wall, because everybody was just, you know, it was a cultural hodgepodge when she was growing up. And I was very surprised to hear about, you know, just that big of a difference and how uncommon my hometown was.
Well, it's okay, because I actually grew up in Wisconsin too, and I had the same thing. Like I you know, it was like such a small town, and then I moved to California, and now I'm on the East Coast, and it's so much more diverse of people, of culture, of music, of entertainment, everything, and especially of food. That's the most important.
I feel like I missed out on the food for sure, and everything else. Just kidding, Mom. Your home cooking's great.
Oh.
So after you moved out there, you kind of just jumped into the travel world. Did you start like doing any research on it? How did you kind of educate yourself? Were there any books, podcasts, personalities that you were following?
Yeah, really good question. So my journey into traveling was like completely unintentional. I really had no previous knowledge of traveling. I didn't know where to look, didn't know, you know, who to really talk to. So my primary resource was my recruiter. And I'm so thankful. I think that's the biggest thing I can say, is to find a good recruiter, because I was skeptical when I was looking into traveling, because I was like, these are 13-week assignments. You know, no one is telling me anything about traveling. I haven't heard of it in school. So how can I even trust it and go buy this? You know, this is my career. I want to make a good career decision. And so I at the time, there are so many resources now, but at the time I didn't know of any. But I just was using Indeed, you know, and I was just job hunting on Indeed and doing the interview process with that. And I was just unsuccessful with getting concrete job assignments from standard jobs. And so I was like, you know, I'll take the leap and I'll you know, apply for traveling, and we'll see. And I spoke to a lot of different companies too. That's one way I got information too. I called maybe 4 or 5 different companies just to sort of see what are the pay rates, you know, how are they talking to me? How's the feel? You know, do I feel comfortable with them? And, you know, my recruiter really stood out, because she was like, here's what it is, the straight and honest, you know, and she really stood by me. She was like, I'm not going to put you in any traveling positions that aren't good for more recent grads, this place is, the traveling position that I ended up taking, she was like, they've had multiple travelers. I mean, they've had multiple travelers before, and, there's been positive reviews. So, she really gave me a lot of good feedback and a lot of good advice. And I felt like comfortable with taking that leap.
Got it. Very, very cool. What has been some unexpected challenges once you were finally into the travel world? And then what's been an unexpected benefit?
I think one of the challenges, especially if you're dating someone at the same time, is being near them and fulfilling all like the traveling requirements, because you can only travel for so long, and then you have to, or maintain your tax home, you can only travel in a certain location for so long. And so because of that, it was sort of difficult because I didn't want to leave my boyfriend, but I still wanted to do traveling because I was liking where I was going, and I was liking my coworkers. And so I think that's the most difficult thing, is if you have someone that you want to be close with and have a relationship, traveling can be difficult because you're sometimes going to have to leave him or her. So at one point it was difficult because I had been traveling for 3 contracts in a row at the same location. And so I was getting upon that tax home regulations. And so I was like, I've got to go somewhere else. I'm sorry. And so luckily I found a traveling position back home. So it was sort of really great in that aspect because I wasn't able to go home very often. So I was able to do a local traveling position in my home of California, Bakersfield, California, and see my family and spend about 3 months with them. So really good quality time with them. But it was also hard to leave my boyfriend at the same time.
Got it. I see. What is something that you know now that you've been traveling for a little bit, that you wish you would have known starting out?
I wish I would have known that traveling could be as, oh goodness, that's a hard question. I was really concerned with traveling at first. Like I was just really torn between standard job, permanent job, or to do traveling. And I was so nervous. Like, I'm not going to tell you, I was super nervous, especially I think because it was New York City. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I ready to do New York City and then also travel in New York City? But I think it's just, maybe I'm one of those lucky ones where it worked out. But I think looking back, I think I'd tell myself, like, take the leap. Like, it's okay to take the leap, and it's if you're not aware of traveling or afraid to take that leap, like, it's okay because it's 13 weeks. Like, that's what the advice that my boyfriend gave to me upon the time, because I was debating whether or not to take the job. And he said, it's 13 weeks. What can it hurt? After that, you leave. And I think that's just the great advice. And that's what I try to tell everyone is that if you're concerned, it's 13 weeks. That's goes by in a blink of an eye.
Absolutely. It's basically a clinical. And so
but you get paid.
If you're a physical therapist and you can handle, there are some horror stories of CIs out there.
Yes.
Mostly good, but there are the CIs from hells.
Yes.
If you can survive that, oh man, you're golden. You can,
totally. I mean, if you can survive PT school, like PT school is so rigorous, and I know other therapists are listening to this. So, just grad school is so rigorous to be a healthcare professional. I think it's tough. And so if you can survive school, you can survive being a traveler for 1 or 2 assignments. Definitely.
Absolutely. And we were kind of talking before we started recording about how much information is out there now. So when I started looking into this 3-4 years ago, there really wasn't much information. And then now when I, kind of started the podcast, it seems like more blogs are popping up, more niches of like traveling with vans and traveling with relationships are popping up as well. And then you've written a guide and also a book. Can you kind of talk about where the guide came from? And then we'll get into your book a little bit later.
Yeah. Good question. So, just like what you were saying, when I was traveling, I had no idea about the resources. And I couldn't really find any resources. And so after traveling for a couple of years, I was like, I've got some downtime. I should write something so that people can be confident with becoming a traveler, because I think it's just the greatest thing. Like, and I'm, even if I didn't write the book or didn't do a website or anything like that, like, I wholeheartedly believe that it's such a great venue for improving your skills and improving your confidence as a therapist. And then financially, it can have some really great benefits. And so when I wrote it, I just wanted to illuminate to people this and give them a guide so that they won't be scared, that they won't be nervous, that they'll know like the steps. And so they can, if they are cautious about whether or not to do traveling, they can have everything all in one area, all in one book, to just be fully prepared with the pros, the cons, just how to go about it, how to choose a company, how to choose a good recruiter, because there's certain things that really helped shape my traveling career and shaped the positive experience I've had with traveling. And so that's why I wrote the book. But now there's so many great resources out there. So I'm definitely by far not the only one. And through doing the book, actually, I've found so many great resources, which I think is ironic. I'm like, come on, Google, give me these resources. But, New Grad Traveling Therapy, New Grad Physical Therapy is a website too that's great. The Traveling Therapist. So, and your podcast, there's so many great resources out there. I have to give everyone credit that I think every traveler is going to be way more informed, and it's going to help the success of all the therapists out there.
Yeah. And I had read the Ultimate Guide for Traveling Physical Therapy, and I'll be putting that link down in the show notes, as well as all the groups that you were talking about. And I didn't realize why your name looked so familiar when you were talking, and I was so embarrassed that I was halfway through this book, and then I realized, oh, you wrote this. But that was a long thing. It was like 65 pages. I was like, holy cow!
Oh yeah. It's actually even more than that. It's really big. It seems like that because it depends on the size of your Kindle.
Okay.
But like on Amazon, it says it's like 140 pages on Amazon. And yeah, it's a good sized book. Like, it took me, I really spent quality time to make this, and I wanted to make something that I could be proud of and that people could use to really help themselves. And it took me a whole year to write it, to edit it, to figure out Kindle and everything, and figure out Amazon publishing and that, make it nice. And I really truly hope like people enjoy it, and that it can help people feel more confident, and also people succeed. There's some tips about the tax home in there, and about finances, like how to choose your traveling area location based on certain things if you want to achieve more financial success.
Got it.
Yeah. So I hope you like it. I hope everyone likes it.
It was very good. And it kind of walked you through. I almost picked it up as a someone who is undecided or on the fence about wanting to do travel PT, and it really walked through like, what is your values, what is your whys. These are the type of personalities that would do great with it. This is the type of personality that maybe you should, kind of consider other options. And you really walk them through that point up until basically their first contract.
Exactly. I wanted to keep, the chapters are short and simple because I wanted to keep it basic. If there's long chapters, you're not going to read it. You're going to get bored and put it away. Well, I don't want to make a textbook. That's boring. But it's something just really simple. It's a quick read, but it's going to help you get from A to Z and get from basically not being a traveler to a traveler. My hope is like in 3 days. Yeah.
Got it.
I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
And then you said that you had a book. Is that the same?
Yep, that's the same thing. It's just
one.
Called a guide, but it's an ebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then something else, I know you're kind of looking here in the next, few years to get maybe a permanent position or something like that. Do you feel like your experiences with traveling is going to aid you into finding that permanent position?
Definitely. Good question. Yeah, I wanted to really bring this up to people. Excellent question. So that's one of the biggest things that I hope travelers can get out of this, is that not only is being a traveling therapist great for building your skills. Like, I've worked in acute rehab, acute care, subacute, Yeah, 3 different settings. And it's just really built my skills. But in addition to that, it's built my resume.
Mm.
And I think that's so powerful, on the blogs and on Facebook groups and so forth. We're really getting, a lot of people get into negotiations, how to get fair compensation. And I think that being a traveler actually has a great benefit in that you can use your higher salary and all those skills that you've built up so much quicker than in a permanent job. And you can use that to help negotiate an even higher salary in a permanent position. Mm-hmm. And that's because of 2 reasons, I think. Like what I said, your skill base, you can get so many more different settings underneath your belt so quickly. And so that's a great tool. And then the second is you always want to have a financial example, like saying I made X number in job A, so I sort of expect that same X number in job B, mm-hmm. And giving someone that number to work off of, I feel like is a great negotiation tactic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the clinic I'm at right now, we kind of just had a student roll through, and he was in the middle of negotiating his first contract, and it reminded me of just a year ago. And I guess how timid and shy I was with asking for a certain amount and then maybe backing off a little bit and not really being as aggressive. But now that I've interacted with other travelers, they've told me like their tools and their tricks. What I realized what I was giving him was probably freaking him out, because I was much more aggressive a year later, and having gone through that negotiation process with another company.
Yeah. It's a learning curve. It's a learning curve. Really, it is. Like I think all therapists, we're just such good people. We're so nice and so kind. And it's so hard, I think, to be like that shark, from Shark Tank and be like, I expect this. And it's tough to do. And really, I say that, but I also have, difficulties negotiation too, because you don't know, like they could be like, fine, we'll get, someone cheaper in the future. But usually I feel like if they've spent the time to interview with you and they've already basically accepted you for the position, then you're in a very strong position to negotiate back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think just through my own personal small amount of negotiations I just went through, you gain the ability to say no much more easy. Mm-hmm. And there's so much power with that. Mm-hmm. When your bare minimum and you go in, and then if they fall short of that, you're just like, no, sorry, I'll have to go somewhere else.
Definitely. Because I think, yeah, because that's the nice thing about traveling is that if it doesn't work out, there's so many jobs out there. There's so many different positions. And so if something doesn't work out, it's okay, because you can talk to your recruiter and you'll quickly get another opportunity. So there's just so many opportunities out there. And I think as a traveler, we just have so many great skills. And that's the thing, is when you negotiate, I feel like one of my best advice, or how I think about it, is that we have so many talents and we've learned so much through our experiences. Highlight your experiences, and that will impress people. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. All about the experiences.
Exactly. In
the clinic and out. All right. So now that you've been traveling for a little bit, Emma, is there anything that you take with you that you feel like you couldn't live without?
One, I have to say my boyfriend, so he doesn't get mad. And then probably secondly, I love podcasts. Okay. When I first started working, I all of a sudden had all this free time, and I was like, I'm so used to learning, but now I don't need to read so much PT stuff. What is there? And so I really got into podcasts, and I was very lucky. My first job, I could walk to work. And so I just plugged in podcasts and was just learning about so many different things. And so I'd say I use Antenna Pod, but there's like Stitcher and lots of great things on your phone, and definitely podcasts. Like I got into a lot of finance podcasts, because all of a sudden you realize when you graduate and then you have student loans and you're like, oh my God, I'm an adult now. Adulting is actually really hard. And 401ks and IRAs and taxes and student loan payments and all that. And I was like, I need resources. So podcasts, it's just a way more entertaining device than reading, to me at least. And so I got into there's a podcast I sort of like, Radical Personal Finance.
Okay.
And I really like his early stuff. And he just explains, he's a CPA, and
Okay.
he explains personal finance just in a really simple way and an easy, understandable way. And I really felt like I learned a lot from his podcast. Yeah.
One of my guys that I have on my financial team, he recommended that one to me as well. He said there's a lot of financial podcasts out there that are a lot of fluff and like energetic and get kind of nitty gritty. He said this one is just like what you need to know.
Yes.
And it's a little bland, but there's so much information in it that was pretty golden.
100%. Yeah.
Got it. I was going to follow up with something about that. Shoot.
Well, if you need more info, little plug here. But, in addition to the book, I realized, speaking of finances, that with student loans, we really need to, start talking more about finances and increasing our knowledge base of finances. And so I'm a big advocate for trying to get out of debt because I have so much of it. And so I did I am doing a website too called debtfreept.com.
Okay.
Just a little plug there. But it's FitBucks is great too for finances as well.
Yes.
I know you've mentioned that as well. But yeah, my website sort of tries to talk about like little ways. We don't go too much into the loans because I'll leave that to the loan advisors and so forth. But, we talk about ways that you can grow your career and that can help get you out of debt and just little other tips. And I talk about traveling in it too.
Good. Yeah. I feel like that's something that we don't get taught very well throughout.
Yes.
It's almost like you're expected to learn it on your own. And I remember sitting in like my university's like student aid center, and they hand me this booklet, and I'm in graduate school. I'm going to have, my doctorate in physical therapy, and I'm sitting there and I'm reading this, and it's like, I don't understand these terms.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the kid that has to do this, say they're graduating school early at like 22 years old. Like, hopefully they have some help along with it. Cause I pretty much had to, battle through that on myself. So I would definitely recommend anybody coming out, get you a financial team behind you, find you a tax person. If you're a traveler tax is a really good option. Find you a CPA or an accountant. And then just anybody who's in the financial world, just to kind of lead you through what's the best attack on how to take down your loans, what your goals in life are, if you're trying to retire early, if you're trying to own a business eventually. And they can kind of take that, maybe start you off with some investments that are going to really set you up nicely toward your values and your goals are later in life. Exactly.
It's all about planning for your future. And I think we don't realize that when we start grad school. Like, I think that's one of my biggest regrets is just not being thoughtful with my choice with my graduate school. Like, I love my school, but the amount of debt that I'm in now, it just changes your opinion of the profession, and which is really sad because I love what I do, but with all that debt comes a great burden. And so I think, having a plan and talking to people to help you feel more comfortable is so important.
There's another podcast out there that I listen to. It's called Breaking Student Debt.
Yeah.
Breaking Student Debt podcast is by Will Boyd, Dr. Will Boyd, and he interviews other professionals in the financial field to kind of teach himself and then teach his audience about how to get out of debt. And he's got some really, really interesting interviews on there. I highly recommend it. I'll also put that down in the show notes. All right. Let's see if I missed anything. Emma, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today or bring up?
Well, I think one thing, I touched upon local traveling. And so I just wanted to bring that up as well, because a lot of people don't realize that there's two different sets of travelers. You can be a traveler and you can travel across the nation and you can do 13-week assignments away from your quote unquote tax home. But you can also do assignments at your tax home or near your tax home. And that's called local traveling. And so I think that for people who are skeptical about traveling, that's another great venue to look into is, just taking a position that's a short-term position near your home. that's what I did when I had to take that short break. I went back home and I did local traveling, and the pay rate and the pay structure is different.
Mhm.
So you're not going to get those benefits of some tax-free stipends like the housing and the meals, but you're going to get other benefits like not having to have duplicate housing and not having to worry about where you're going to live, packing up all your belongings and moving it all over the place. And so I
Right.
think when people look into traveling, I think that's one thing I'd also say is to ease into it by maybe checking out local traveling, or, you know, if you're getting burnt out by traveling, try local traveling and do that, because you can still get a higher rate, I think, than, or at least when I did it, I got a higher rate than I did as a standard job or permanent job.
Mhm.
But yet I was able to live at home and eat mom's food and use mom's Netflix. And so there's some really great perks with
Yeah,
local
all the
traveling.
necessities are right there.
Exactly.
Netflix.
And you get, it's just nice to be back home a little bit
Oh
and
yeah,
that. So
absolutely.
it's good. So I would say, yeah, check out local traveling. And even for people, I think one last thing I can add too is that
Mhm.
traveling isn't just for new grads or younger individuals. I think anyone can do traveling. Like when I talk to people about it, I think it's also a great way for people who are maybe looking to ease into working less hours,
Mhm.
because one travel gig, uh, oftentimes, or two travel gigs, is sometimes the same amount that you're going to get paid as a permanent position after taxes and everything.
Mhm.
And so looking into doing travel or local traveler just for a couple assignments here and there is great for those more experienced PTs who are looking for less hours but still getting some compensation, or just the flexibility. Like I think when I have kids and have a family, maybe I'll want to settle down a little bit, and traveling or local traveling can give me that flexibility,
Mhm.
without having to sacrifice monetarily.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You were talking about local travel. And so basically you would travel around your home within a drivable distance. And so you wouldn't get tax benefits. And they call that being an itinerant. So for
Yes.
those who aren't aware, if you ever see the term itinerant, that's basically meaning that you are um, understanding that you're not going to be receiving as many tax reimbursements as you could, which when I was at TravCon, it was on the amount was between $3,000 and $9,000 per year. So in the grand scheme of things, not that big of a chunk. Don't get me wrong; it's still a great amount to put towards student debt. But when you're making much more as a traveler, that amount is much less. Um,
Exactly. You can, and when you weigh the pros and cons of finding duplicate housing and the cost of short-term housing, I mean,
mm,
I'm on the East Coast here. We looked for short-term housing and it was like $3,000 a month for some apartments.
wow.
I mean, when you think about that, that negates any sort of benefit you have sometimes
Hmm.
of those tax-free stipends. So
Absolutely.
it's just there's other opportunities and other ways to travel. So I just want people to know that there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of creativity. You can really mix and
Absolutely.
match and play with it and have fun with it. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. And actually, there's a bill right now going through the U.S. Senate, and another one that has already been okayed by the U.S. House, and another one that's following up, just in case this other bill that's in the Senate right now kind of doesn't work out. But kind of bad news for travelers. It's December right now, but they're currently making the decision whether or not they're going to keep giving us tax reimbursements.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Contracting.
that.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's looking like the House and the Senate is in favor in order to save wages and things like that in the for the national government. And so it'll be interesting if that does pass, how that's going to change tax homes, because that's going to heavily de-incentivize
yes. Yeah.
having a travel or having a tax home, having showing that you're paying rent at a permanent address and things like that.
Well,
So
that's
I
interesting.
would,
Yeah, I had no idea about that.
yeah,
Wow. Well,
yeah.
I know
So
that'll really change the whole culture of traveling.
mhm.
I don't know how, because I
Might
mean,
make
it's
it
not
a
just
little less
trips.
stressful. You don't
Yeah.
have to, if I, depending on how it affects everything, I'm still kind of reading up on it, so I don't know how much it'll affect. But if they completely, just strip those tax reimbursements, it sounds like there's not going to be really much of a reason to have a tax home.
Yeah.
And so really you could work near home and you're not going to be any more penalized than you would like going off somewhere else halfway across the US. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And then it'll also be interesting. I feel like once they do it, it's going to stick around for a while. It's harder to give money to the national government that it is take it away. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. If it does go in effect, it'll be January 1st of 2018 is what I've been reading. And so it'll stay tuned, I guess. We're all waiting to see what happens.
Definitely keep me in tune of that. I don't.
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
Another thing that's they're slowly starting to try to pass. I forget the exact phrase that they coined it, but they're trying to make it more like, at least for PTs, our license will be able to be more national. Mm-hmm. I forget the phrase that they're using, but if you're licensed in New Jersey, you can then also work in other states I think it's to help promote basically telehealth. I know the nurses have that, where they have one licensure and that almost covers them for every state. And I think the PT board is trying to advocate for that. And I think a couple states have passed it.
Mm-hmm. So they call it a compact licensure.
Yes,
nurses already do have it. And so they are able to basically say, if they go to a new state, it kind of works like a driver's license. If you're already okayed by another state and this state will recognize you, you're okay to practice here. You just have to read up on your own. There will be some type of, I'm sure, like getting you prepared to work in another state and knowing
a law exam. Probably.
Yeah. But you won't have to go through all the hoops and the trainings that we're doing now in order to work in another state. But as of now, we have more than the original 10 that we needed to sign up. So they are currently writing the bill. And then I believe it will be coming out maybe April 2018 is what I was told, but that's just hearsay. So sometime, hopefully in 2018, we'll have an actual compact licensure. So if you're soon to be new grad out there, you're coming in at a good time. So that will definitely help. And maybe that will help balance the whole tax reimbursement thing if that thing goes through.
Definitely. Because I'm tired of holding so many different licenses, following up on continuing education rules and all those different regulations. So that would be much more convenient.
Yes.
I'm going to come to you for travel advice as well as law advice.
No, don't do that. I'm not a law expert. I have some friends if you need one, though. Oh, gosh. Well, thank you so much, Emma, for joining today. Really appreciate it. Is there any way that you'd prefer the listeners to kind of reach out and contact you if they had any questions?
Yeah, so I've got a couple venues. I have the website, so you can go to www.debtfreept.com and you can write comments there. Check that out. There's a link to my book on that website too. Amazon has my book, The Ultimate Guide to Traveling Physical Therapy. and then you can just shoot me an email. I want to help people. I want to help people succeed. And just like you, I want to help provide resources. So you can email me at debtfreept@gmail.com.
Okay. Awesome. And for the other listeners, if you're looking for the next episode, I do the official launches on the New Medical Nomads podcast Facebook page. And then also, if you have any questions for Emma or myself, you can join the New Medical Nomads Facebook group. And that's where I kind of host all the interviewees and the guests on the show, and for people to reach out to, or any other questions. If you just want to post out there, maybe you're trying to do a travel meetup somewhere and you're looking for friends. That's a good place to do that as well. And then also you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher, YouTube as well. Usually YouTube has the earlier episodes, so you'll get access to the show before I officially launch them, usually about a week or two in advance. But if you're listening, would love to kind of have you share, like, comment, whatever, show us some love. Definitely appreciate it and help get our message out to all the travelers or soon to be travelers. But thank you so much, Emma.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a blast. I had a lot of fun. Everyone listen. Thank you so much. It was great meeting you and great talking to you.
Yeah, nice meeting you. And have fun out on the East Coast and safe travels.
Thank you. You too. Bye.